The Mystics head coach was just escorted off the court by the police. So you know we have to find the deeper story there. Sydney Johnson is the head coach of the Washington Mystics, who was also given GM responsibilities. And this was just before the season started. So that's why that storyline is out there that he was pretty much set up to fail. Because that's a lot of responsibility to put on someone who's had 1 year as an assistant coach as their entire WNBA resume. He was pretty much put in charge of it all. I mean, for the most part. And their heads have stayed above water, mostly leaning on the fact that they're not the worst team in the league. But obviously something like this puts a spotlight on the team, the roster, and always secretly the most important, the front office. The Mystics are now 4-5 under Johnson. Again, his first season as head coach and general manager. So he is responsible for building the roster, having some type of vision for the team, and then coaching said roster, and then having some type of development plan for said team. That's a lot on one person's plate, especially considering the Mystics had someone who was more than willing to do everything a general manager is supposed to do. I mean, they had Jamila Wideman at the helm, on top of having first-hand experience and knowledge in the WNBA. She's played for the Sparks, the Cleveland Rockers, the first iteration of the Portland Fire, and the Sun. On top of international play, she holds multiple degrees and obviously had a plan for this team. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been fired for creative differences, let's say. And that's the part that bugs me the most, because this happened right before the start of free agency, which would have led right into the draft. So I think this is where they lost any momentum they were gaining with Wideman getting things underway, because she was only given that 1 season to really give it a good try. To abruptly give both roles to Sydney is kind of wild, and you can only imagine how free agency and the draft would have played out differently if Jamila was still there. Big signings, maybe a couple of different picks there, especially in the first round. I really like Cody, and even during the draft I was happy when she was picked, but overall the Mystics just have a lot of forwards, and even letting go of Emily Inksler makes the pickup even more questionable. Like, what was really going on in this decision room that put this roster together? And of course that leads right back to Sydney Johnson, but he was wearing too many hats way too quickly. He was given a pretty interesting job and probably knew he has no choice but to either deliver or lose his job. He had to fill the roster with 3 first-round picks, which leaves pretty high expectations, a very compressed free agency, and 1 year as an assistant coach in the WNBA, a lot of rookies and no veterans on the team to recruit for the team. Again, I think Wideman would have been one of the best recruiters in free agency, an open landscape, and I don't know who Sydney Johnson went after, but he obviously struck out. All they were left with were their rookies and the depleted roster from the last couple of seasons. Pretty much all their vets are gone. It actually kind of sucks. The Mystics haven't made it out of the first round of the playoffs since their championship in 2019. So really, you expect the franchise to make big swings, even desperate swings really. But this last decision to put Sydney in charge of both, or rather wear 2 hats, seems more dismissive, or just a huge afterthought for the people in charge, or person rather, because Michael Winger is the president of basketball operations for Monumental Sports and Entertainment. Yeah, not just the Mystics, the entire basketball operations for this ownership group. This guy is in charge of the Washington Mystics, the Washington Wizards, and the Washington Capitals. I know this looks great on paper, but this dude has way too many jobs, or at least too many responsibilities to do them all completely properly. Both men's leagues that he's in charge of have GMs and coaches that are not the same person, so they haven't condensed this hierarchy too much. But that does give you an idea of how many decisions this guy is making. And it was his decision to fire Jamila Wideman and give Sydney full reign of the team. And obviously I don't know these people's day to day, but I have to imagine he was at least a part of the conversations for free agency and the draft, and this is still what they ended up with. And this is not a critique to the players. They actually have some great young players. I mean, all-star caliber players, but the fit is getting weirder and weirder, and this is great insight into why. Not only is the coach slash GM doing way too much, their president of basketball operations is doing way too much. So the Mystics just aren't getting the proper attention they deserve. And honestly, Wideman had that. So when you get to this blowout in Atlanta, It's so much more bubbling below the surface. Everyone that hit the floor for Atlanta scored, so that means the defensive plan and schemes were trash out the window. You know he's getting pressure from the high-ups, having a nice young core but not racking up wins, even though he was thrown to the wolves. And it doesn't really seem to be a light at the end of the tunnel. I mean, at this point, it would be up to the GM, which is also the coach, to figure out some trades or changes with the roster or coaching staff to rack up some wins. Now, if they're tanking, that's a completely different conversation. But why blow up this bad or bring this much attention to your team if this is what you want to happen? And it obviously just becomes something that's finally boiled over. The ownership group structure for Monumental changed in 2024, so that's another reason for a bit of the shakeups. But Winger has a lot of experience in the front office, a general manager for the Clippers and executive for the Oklahoma City Thunder. So these decisions weren't on accident. Mostly they were calculated risks or huge bets using the Mystics' future as leverage. And for the recent changes going on in the the newest CBA and hyper focus on your team and players, it's like Washington went backwards for some reason. And really, like any other business, you really only see it from the customer facing positions. We're seeing it from Sidney Johnson because it's all on his shoulders. He's literally left out there by himself. Yeah, Winger's his boss, but the Wizards have the #1 pick in the draft. He's super busy. I don't know much about hockey, but he's in charge over there too. So Sidney's on his own. I hope he's not fired for this misstep, but he definitely needs some help. I said it on draft night, the way their roster is set up, they need to make some trades. But kind of like the Portland Fire, they're not really left with a lot of options after not bringing anybody over in free agency. This was literally the best year to make big moves for stars, guaranteed starters if that was the move, but that was obviously not the plan for the Mystics. And the deeper issue there is their timeline. Obviously this age group is behind the Aces or the Liberty, but you're lined right up against the Dallas Wings, the Seattle Storm, and maybe like the tail end of the Valkyries. So you're telling me after 3 to 4 years of full development, those are the teams you expect this roster to compete with? I just don't see it. Short of some slight tweaks, again, no disrespect to the players. I think they have some nice players on this roster. They just haven't figured out how to get them all to mesh together the right way. And that could be because their coach is doing way too much. But that is obviously up to the Washington ownership group and Michael Winger to decide.
Don't forget to like and subscribe, players.